Community review process is interesting a lot. It's been tried a lot in a lot of different places. Some places it's been very successful, some places it hasn't. I'm not opposed to it if it's handled right, and the important parts are, of course, I mean, obviously the community wants to input the community what's going on, and I absolutely agree. If it's done properly, then we do, generally in law enforcement, we do a pretty good job in internal affairs. We take them really, really seriously, and we should, because they're really important. San Diego Police Department developed a system that worked very well. The actual internal affair investigation is conducted by the department, but after that, a board is set up, and keep in mind it's important that the officer's rights are protected in that process too. But then the board reviews the results, they review the investigation, was the investigation properly, and then they send the investigation back for follow-up type review. I want this done, and I think this should have been done, and I think this was done well. I think that process works well. My concern with review boards is when people that are not experienced investigators get involved actually doing the investigation. I don't think that has a history of working well anymore in the country. A model like San Diego's program, I think, would be a workable project. I wouldn't have any problem with that.
Thank you. And this one will be for you, Terry. The interim chief was quoted as being unable to provide a school resource officer due to staffing levels. Currently, the police department dedicates an officer full-time to the regional drug task force, an officer to traffic enforcement, and one to downtown patrol. Additionally, officers participate on the Medford SWAT team. In your view of ranking priorities, how would you rank the importance of a school resource officer to these other involvements?
I think a school resource officer is important. I come from an agency that has one of the largest per capita school resource officer programs in the country. We have a school resource officer in every one of our middle schools. We've been very successful. If you go to the COPS office, the U.S. Department of Justice, Office of Clean Water Policing, they'll list our agency as one of 14 model agencies in the country for community resource officer programs. We look at community as SRO programs as being an investment in the future.
What would you draw?
You know, without knowing, I hate to, the BRF report, the obvious thing coming from the BRF report, you know, their recommendation was traffic. That would seem to be good, but, you know, I don't know what the historical reasons are why the traffic program. For someone on the outside that hasn't really kind of looked at all those things, you know, the DEA task force, what are the funding issues there? The downtown, I certainly couldn't see that dropping somebody working in the downtown area, because that's obviously a big issue in the city. But I don't think anybody can come in from the outside without sitting down with the officer, sitting down with the community, and it would be inappropriate for me to prioritize those things, but an SRO is very, very high on my list of priorities.
Gary?
I agree. I can think of a lot of benefits with an SRO in the high schools and junior highs as well, but particularly in high school. And not just to feel good for teachers or to be involved in kind of criminal conduct, but to put those officers close to those young folks and to have that kind of connection, to teach classes from time to time and to be there for them, not just during school, but even at the after school activities like football games and so on and so forth. We all found to be extremely valuable, and I would never give up that program easily. That would be very tough. Talking with Chief Goodpasser, I think he's already made the determination to go ahead and make some adjustments, and not with the traffic officer, but with the, I believe it was the community outreach. But there is room within the organizational chart that's currently on the PERF report to make that change without it costing any more money. Of course, I think it's always wonderful when the school districts chip in.
It's a never-ending issue.
I never have thought it should be just a city issue to have to fund that whole thing, because it really provides an administrative officer and a very great resource for the school campus, but that's something that has to be discussed later on.
Good. So Gary, here's a question from one of the citizens. Communication is essential to successful police departments, as well as governmental administrations. What is your experience in dealing with outside governmental agencies as well as citizens during man-made or environmental disasters?
Well, we had what was called mutual aid, and so we already had in place the opportunity to have people assist us from all the surrounding agencies, and the same thing would apply here. As long as you have good relationships with your sheriff's departments and other neighboring cities, they'll come help you as well as you'll come help them. I mentioned in a previous oral board, Knott's Berry Farm had a Cinco de Mayo day on a weekday as a celebration of that day. Charged everybody a nickel admission. Figured that not many kids would come because it was a school day. 100,000 children showed up. Their parents dropped them off and drove away. The park was full at about 35,000, so we literally had 70,000 kids wandering the streets with no place to go, and turned into a mini riot with no pre-planning, just like that. And it was all resolved because we already had in place operational plans for how to deal with situations like that. You develop a command post, you call in that mutual aid assistance immediately, and you set in the process those things that help not only diffuse the problem so it doesn't get worse and create a real issue, but eventually calm the whole thing down. But to me, that's the answer to those kinds of things. You have to have good working relationship from all elements. The parole board used to meet in our department. School SR boards used to meet in our department. They were just all those different kinds of relationships were in our department, so that we were always there as a resource to one another, and it works very, very well. And that kind of communication doesn't happen overnight. People get to know who you are. They get to know your name. Again, not just the chief, but all the other folks that make those contacts and differences. And after a while, it just becomes normal procedure. This is just what you do.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add to that. You have to establish the relationships beforehand. You have to have a history of when other people need your help, you show up and help them, because that's how you're going to get that payback there. And another thing to add is when you have those things, you have to be brutally honest in how you did. We had a couple of weeks ago, we had about 500 kids in one of our high schools. Lack of a better word, riot. We use the term incident because we don't have a riot in one of our schools. We had this incident. We thought we did pretty well. Actually, our officers are trained. We've had a few helped other cities. This is the first time we had one that size. But after it was over, we sat down in a room like this with everybody, and we were brutal on what we did right and what we did wrong, so that we get better next time. And I think that's the key. You got to realize what your strengths and weaknesses are and build on them.
Well, perfect with that, Terry. Describe a situation when you failed to meet your objective, and what did you learn from that?
Safe and Clean Neighborhoods was a program that I developed in the city of Fontana a couple years ago. And if you're familiar with the broken windows theory, it's the idea that, we got to go out and clean up the yards, clean up the graffiti, and I actually really do believe in that. And we've been doing neighborhood revitalization efforts in our city for a long time. We've had some really spectacular successes. We try to expand that in our safe and clean neighborhoods. We try to pick core communities and really work on the broken windows and see if we could have a long-term impact on crime. And when we do things like that, we try to have an evaluation strategy. So my evaluation strategy going in was 1 year, we're going to try this, put these resources for 1 year, and at the end of 1 year, if it doesn't work, we're going to stop. And at the end of 1 year, it wasn't working. And we stepped back and retrenched and looked at that. Why wasn't it working? Well, probably some of our goals hadn't been realistic. We probably hadn't put enough resources in it. And, so I learned a lot from that. You try. The important part is if you recognize your own failures, you try to learn from them and move on to the next thing. We did a lot better next time we did that.
Thank you.
Me. Okay. I can think of 2 or 3, but the one that really stands out the most to me, I wouldn't even classify it as a failure. It's just an effort to do what I thought was the right thing. Buena Park uses safe and sane fireworks, and all the surrounding cities do not. They're all illegal. So what that does is it draws a whole ton of people to our city so they can shoot off fireworks, which, by the way, I love. I've shot off fireworks my whole life, and I think they're as fun as anybody else does. But the bottom line was it was attracting thousands and thousands of people from outside our city, and they were bringing along the illegal stuff along with the legal. And in the end, we had a little 8-year-old boy who was shot and killed in the park with a .22 caliber bullet, and he died in his mother's arms, with over 250 people standing right there, and nobody heard the shot because there were so many illegal fireworks being shot off and popping away. I felt terrible about that. I was on duty. I was always out in the field on those events, and I just decided that I like fireworks. I understand how many people were earning funds for nonprofit and other organizations that were extremely important. It was their only source of revenue. Yet at the same time, I thought it was only the right thing to do as the chief for public safety to say that I think that this is a mistake. And so I put together a big effort with a lot of folks in my department, and it was a very difficult. I never saw a city council meeting so full of people in my life as that time. But the bottom line is the vote was 3-2 to keep the fireworks. So, but I don't think I failed. I just feel like I did what was right, and now the rest is up to the citizens to decide. What they need from me is to hear what I believe is the public safety issue and how it should be handled, and then they decide by vote, and they did.
Well, it's